Hi, my name is Sarah Hyman, and I am the Assistant Director for Leadership in the Center for Student Involvement. And I'm joined today by Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna, and I'm the Student Leadership Assistant in the Center for Student Involvement.
And today we're going to be talking with you about personality types and assessments and leadership styles, tools that you can use to better understand yourself as a student leader. So a little overview of what the session's going to be like today. We're hoping to, again, give you some different resources that you can use to accomplish all these things listed on your screen here. So self-discovery, self-assessment, self-reflection. So understanding more about who you are, what your personality traits are, what your character is, what your strengths are, and reflecting on those, on how maybe you see them in yourself, and how others may see them as well. And all of these things tie into your leadership style too. So it can impact the way you communicate with other people, how you work on a team, all of those important leadership skills that people have. So today we're going to talk about 5 different assessments. They're sometimes called inventories. We're calling them tools because they're resources that you can use. But today we're going to talk to you about these 5 items on your screen: True Colors, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, Clifton Strengths, Languages of Appreciation, and Enneagram. And we're going to give you kind of an overview of what they are and how you can use them. And I kind of asked before we formally started what everyone's experience is so far with these. So maybe you'll get a refresher as we go through, and we might ask you a couple questions too along the way. So we will start with Anna telling us about True Colors.
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about where it comes from. So why do we think True Colors is important and what basis does it have? And so it's pretty interesting because this test actually can be traced back to 460 BC to Hippocrates, who actually did some of the very first studies on human personality. And he said that you could put human personality into 4 different temperament types. And so that theory has been expanded on a lot throughout the years, which has given us the first True Colors test in 1978, in which human personality is broken down and kind of assigned into 4 different colors based on those first 4 personality temperaments. So a little bit about what it actually measures. So it's a self-assessment. So you answer questions about yourself and how you view yourself in the world. And then you're sorted into 4 main colors, which are blue, orange, green, and gold. And we'll go into a little bit about what each one of those colors means if you were to receive it as your result. And then some of the ways that this assessment sorts you into those colors is by measuring what motivates you, how you gain self-esteem, what your sources of worthiness are, how you communicate with others, your values, what stresses you out, and more. So it takes a lot of those components and kind of uses them to divide you into 4 broad categories. Some things to keep in mind when you take this assessment is that it's going to identify a primary and secondary color, and those are considered your preferred styles. So while you only have 2 colors given to you as your results, you're still going to have characteristics from those other colors that will fit you. People don't operate very well when they only operate within the boundaries of a few colors. And so just keep in mind that while you're reading through some of these, there might be 3 or even 4 of the colors that stand out to you as being like, oh, I see that in myself a lot. So don't think that you can only be one color. Your true colors can also change over time. I know personally that they have for me. I first took it, I think, in high school, and it's changed a lot since then. So don't be afraid to come back and take this if you think that your results might have changed. They probably did. And then also, as it is a self-assessment, it's not 100% accurate. So if you take it and you're like, this is nothing like me, I don't identify with this at all, there could be some room for error. A lot of people interpret questions differently or something like that. So just keep that in mind. It's not telling you exactly who you are. It's just kind of a guide. So we'll first talk a little bit about primary blue colors. So some keywords that people who have this color as their primary color might describe themselves as is empathetic, compassionate, and cooperative. So people who get the primary blue color are typically calm, optimistic, social. They value sincerity and compassion, and they tend to be quiet leaders who inspire others through hard work and kindness. And so if you're wondering if this might fit you, some statements that you might want to consider to see if you resonate with would be, I feel a need to contribute, to encourage, and to care, or that you value integrity and unity in relationships. Primary orange, some keywords to describe primary orange people are energetic, spontaneous, and charming. So they tend to be action-oriented, competitive, and adventurous. They're usually more comfortable taking risks and prefer adaptive schedules. And they also tend to prefer careers with a lot of independence and freedom. And so some ways that people who get the primary orange color have described themselves as needing fun, variety, stimulation, and excitement. And then they also value skill, resourcefulness, and courage. People who are primary green typically are analytical, intuitive, and visionary. So they're people who seek innovation and they like to problem solve. They're able to think outside the box and see the big picture in situations. They're usually independent and they take great pride in their work. And they highly value intelligence, fairness, and justice. So some ways they might describe themselves is that they seek knowledge, understanding, answers, and that they live by their own standards. And then people who are primary gold are punctual, organized, and precise. Primary golds tend to like structure and organization. They're usually on time and typically expect others to be on time as well. They greatly value rules, respect, and dependability, and they enjoy having others rely on them for help. And they usually have a high moral standard, which kind of goes along with valuing rules, respect, and dependability. Ways they have described themselves is they feel a need to be useful and to belong, and they have a strong sense of what is right and wrong. So how can you use these results? So even if you haven't taken this, you might have seen some of those colors and think, oh, I really feel like green describes me. And so using these colors can kind of help you understand yourself. So there's some questions that are helpful to consider when you go through the True Colors assessment. So for example, if you get orange as your primary color, you might think about, what is my communication style? Orange people tend to communicate by being more loud, they're more the center of attention, whereas someone who has a primary blue might be kind of leading from the back. And so it's kind of helpful to think about in what ways can you use your color to help communicate, whether it's in an organization, a group project, a career, anything like that. And then you can also think about this in terms of, what do you like to do? So is there a particular event that you're doing and you want to take on some work, or you want to do some volunteering? Using these colors can help determine what you might get the most enjoyment out of. So someone who has that primary gold color, they might want to work with something in which they're able to establish more of that like valuing justice part of it. So they might want to work in ways where they can help other people kind of be heard, come up. And then you might have people who are primary blue who want to do more about showing people compassion. So they might be out actually working with others and stuff like that. So just using that can kind of help as a guide. And then another thing to consider is that if you want to flip to, color combinations, yes. Color combinations are incredibly important. So like I said before, you're not just one color. Typically, you're given that secondary color, and that will give more depth and insight into what your primary color means. So your secondary color works to support and influence that primary color. And so a fun statistic to look at, so this is what the general population for the United States is broken down into, and what percentage of the population are what color. But interestingly, a majority of teachers are blue and gold. So again, kind of can be a helpful guide in deciding a future career. And I was actually thinking back on some of my teachers I've had. And after I've looked at all of these results, I can definitely sort my favorite teachers into blue and gold categories, which I think is very interesting. And then there's also a little chart over here to help you give some more characteristics and traits of the different colors.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. Okay, so next we want to talk to you about the MBTI, or the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. And I'm curious if you have done this before, please throw in the chat what your MBTI type is. so we can talk about it together. But MBTI, as it showed on the screen, stands for the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. So this was a tool developed by Catherine Cook Briggs and her daughter, Isabel Briggs Myers. So it's a mother-daughter team. It was developed during World War II, and it's based on Carl Jung's 4 psychological functions. So Jung speculated that people experience the world using 4 principal psychological functions, which were sensation, intuition, feeling, and thinking. And Jung believed that one of these 4 functions is dominant for a person most of the time. So then with this, Myers and Briggs came up with their own categories of introversion versus extroversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, and judging versus perceiving. And they said that each person has a preferred quality from each category. So you either prefer introversion or extroversion. You either prefer sensing or intuition, and so on. And so all of these different types of combinations lead to having 16 unique personality types that come from this assessment. So 1 letter from each category is taken to produce a 4-letter test result. For example, I am an ENFP, so I rely on extroversion, intuition, feeling, and perceiving. So ENFP is what they call my personality type. So what this assessment tells you, it can break into each of these dichotomies that were on the screen have different functions that they tell you about yourself. So the first one is attitudes, or where you get your energy. So this is the E versus I, the introversion versus extroversion. So if you rely more on introversion, introversion literally means inward turning. So if you are engaging with other people, you are expending energy through action. This type of people prefer to reflect, then act, and then reflect again. And to them, alone time is what helps rebuild their energy. Whereas on the other side of things, extroversion or outward turning, people draw energy from action. So that's where they get their energy if they're more extroverted. And they tend to do the opposite of what introversion does. They tend to act, then reflect, and then act again. And when they are inactive, that actually leads to a decline in their motivation. So the MBTI assessment really together kind of sorts for an overall preference of one versus the other here. None of these things are better or worse than the others, but Briggs and Myers recognize that each of the cognitive functions can operate in the external world of behavior, action, people, and things, which is an extroverted attitude, or in the internal world of ideas and reflection, an introverted attitude. The next grouping is your perceiving functions, or how you understand new information. So sensing, the S, uses your 5 senses. They trust things that are tangible and concrete and information that's in the present. And they distrust hunches or things that feel like they kind of come out of nowhere. Whereas intuition, or the letter N for intuition, since I is already being used for introverted, and it stands for intuition. And they take in new information in terms of its context within available data elsewhere. So they trust patterns and are interested in future possibilities. The third grouping is your decision-making functions. So you're judging using your either sensing or intuition data. So if you are a thinking type, you rely on logic. These people are usually reasonable, casual, consistent. They follow the rules. They see things from a detached standpoint. They tend to be direct, and they value truth. Whereas people who judge information with empathy, they are looking for things that value harmony. They look for a consensus or things that feel like they fit right. They consider the needs of the people involved when making those judgments. And that final grouping, the fourth grouping, is your lifestyle preference. So how you relate to the outside world. So for judging, if you have a J, when you take the assessment, if it comes out with a J, this means usually that you like to have matters settled. But this also tells you about how you appear to the world through your judging function. So through your T or F. So if you come through the assessment and you get a J for your lifestyle preference, that means you appear to the world through your judging function. So if you are a TJ, then you appear to the world as a logical person. If you are an FJ, you appear to the world as an empathetic person. Whereas perception, if you take this assessment and you come out with a perception, a P, then you like to keep your options open, but you also appear to the world as your perceiving function. So whether you're a sensing or intuitive person. So if you are an SP, you come and you relate to the world as a concrete person. If you are an NP, then the world sees you as an abstract person. So all of these things together, like I said, they give you one of 16 personality types with all 4 letters together. And there are plenty of memes available online and resources out there for how these 16 types relate to each other. You can kind of see this Venn diagram on the screen here of what the different types have in common compared to these 5 things: dreams, memes, schemes, regimes, and teams. There's also things out there that help you understand the types and their groups together. So for example, people are good and individuals are bad. That might be a very, very generalistic way to categorize INFJs, ISFJs, ESFP, and ENFP people, and so on and so forth. So how you can use the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the MBTI. What I like about MBTI is it gives you 16 different personality types. So it's a little bit more individualized than 4 colors, because you'll have large groups of people that fall into 4 different colors and the true colors things. But 16, you can kind of get a more, like I said, individualized sense of who people are. So I find this to be really useful in groups or in personal relationships in terms of understanding other people. It's really great for getting to know new people. It can take a little while for you to get used to understanding the acronyms and what they mean. But once you do become comfortable and familiar with MBTI, it's a great shorthand for kind of getting an initial awareness of someone's personality. So if I were to just meet you and you were told me that you were an INTJ, I would immediately be able to understand a few things about you, that you are probably logic driven, that you are probably interested in big ideas and how things work, things like that. So it can be really useful for, again, just immediately getting to know somebody. As I mentioned, with MBTI, this is a very popular personality assessment. There are plenty of resources and memes out there on the internet. Tumblr and Instagram, for example, have a ton. There's also plenty on Pinterest as well. It's also easy to find team building activities on this. Plenty out there if you do a Google search of different activities you can do either with a student organization or with a group or with your friends as well. And there's free assessments you can find online for this. A very popular one is 16personalities.com as a place that you can go and you can take the assessment for free, and then it will give you a profile of yourself. And that is one that's popular enough that you see it a lot on the internet and other places, like I said, on Instagram as well. So that is MBTI. And now I guess we'll have Anna talk about Clifton Strengths.
Yeah, so Clifton Strengths is something you might have heard a lot about here at K-State. I know K-State is a strengths campus, and so a lot of departments talk about this a lot or highlight it a lot in classes. And if you have any strengths that you feel comfortable sharing, if you've taken this assessment before and want to put those in the chat, and we can kind of talk about them at the end, that would be great. So some background on the strengths test. So the Strengths Finder first launched in 1999, and it was created by Don Clifton. And the reason he created this was he wanted people to focus on what they were good at. So a lot of those self-assessments you can find before this time focused a lot about what you needed to improve on. And he wanted to show people that everyone has strengths, everyone has things they're good at, and this assessment can help find those. And then kind of an interesting fact is that 90% of Fortune 500 companies actually use this assessment to bring the power of the strengths test into their workplace and company culture. So it's a really powerful tool. And once you've taken it and have examined your strengths, it can be really helpful. So kind of a deep dive into what strengths measures. So again, the first and foremost is everyone has strengths. So even if you think, oh, there's something I'm particularly good at, I don't know what my strengths could be, you have a strength, I promise. So this test is going to gather information on your recurring patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior. And then it's going to assign you 5 top strengths. Even though some people do have more, you can read all about this if you take the assessment and read into your personal bio. It will show you your top 5. There are 34 total strengths that you can be assigned in this assessment. And we're not going to go into depth about all of them, but they're divided into 4 main categories. So the first one is executing. So that's all about turning ideas into reality. So how do you make things happen? So there are a number of strengths that fit that category. The second is influencing. So that's about influencing others, how you take charge, speaking up, and making sure others are heard. And then there's relationship building. So strengths in that category focus on holding teams together. So how do you nurture strong relationships? And then finally, there's the strategic thinking category. And that's about how you make good decisions, how you absorb information, and how you create good outcomes for yourself. So what does strengths actually tell you? So like we talked about, your strengths tell you what you excel in. And so knowing what these are can really help to be a good team member and a good leader. And so with your strengths, the best way to use them is to get in a group of people who have different strengths than you. So the best teams are formed by people who have different strengths, and you can kind of play off of those strengths with each other. So so again, align with team members who have different strengths than you. Knowing your strengths can influence what types of work you take on. So for example, if one of your strengths is a ranger, which is someone who is really good at organization, you might take on any types of roles in a certain project that have that organization capacity to them. So you might want to organize the schedule or something like that because you know that's a strength you have, and someone else in your group might not have that strength. It's also important to note that strengths can be applied in different ways. For me personally, my number one strength is actually competition. And I know that when people hear that, they think, oh, I'm someone who just wants to win all the time. It has kind of a negative connotation of being overly competitive. That's not how I apply my competition strength. So I see that as a way to challenge myself and work on my personal performance and growth. And so I use competition to look where I have been and then use that as a starting point to build myself up to be better. And so, and again, after taking this assessment, there's a lot of information about each individual strength that you can look up. But just know that strengths are a starting point and they don't necessarily have to be applied the way you originally think they might. So how can you take this assessment? So this assessment is actually usually a paid for assessment online, but all incoming K-State freshmen, transfer students, graduate students, international students, you're all given a code. If you are no longer a freshman and you never took this assessment, you can recover this code. If you visit kstate.edu/strengths, this website right here, there's a lot of information on there. Not only about what different strengths are or what they mean, how you can apply them, but also information about taking your strengths assessment. You can also, if you have a student organization you want to talk to about strengths and work on how you can use those in your organization, you can actually have strength ambassadors come and give workshops on it. There's just a lot of really great resources here that I highly encourage you to check out. Be like Bill. I like Bill right here. So take the Strengths Finder. You'll know what your 5 unique talents are. And then back to those 4 main categories that we talked about a little bit earlier. So these are all 34 of the strengths and which category they fit into. And I see we had some chats in here about strength. So Sarah and Kelly both have empathy as your number 1 strength, which is really fun. So that strength would actually fall into the, actually, I don't know what category that falls into. I see it. It's the relationship building category. So they would have relationship building as their dominant category, which means they're able to build strong relationships and hold teams together. So that's really cool. My number one of competition, that falls into influencing, and I actually have several of my top 5 strengths that are influencing, so I guess that's where I'm supposed to be. But that's taking charge, speaking up, making sure your whole team is heard. Has anybody else taken Clifton Strengths out of curiosity? If not, that's okay. I do recommend looking at it. I learned a lot about myself and how I've applied those, and there's definitely a lot more room to learn. So I highly encourage checking out that website and taking the strengths assessment.
Yeah, and as Anna mentioned, not only on that website can you get the code to take this assessment, but K-State does have a lot of resources dedicated to Clifton Strengths. And you can even get some strengths advocates, I believe is what they're called, to come to like an organization meeting or something like that and do an activity or an event with you as well. So a lot of resources at K-State for strengths.
I do want to highlight what Kelly just said in the chat about using your strengths in job interviews. I've personally done that where I've been asked what my top 5 strengths are. And it's a really great way to not only connect with your interviewer, but kind of give them concrete examples of things that you're good at and ways that you could help their organization.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anna. And thank you, Kelly. All right, next we want to talk about languages of appreciation. And this might sound somewhat familiar to you. Languages of Appreciation was a book written by Gary Chapman and Paul White, published in 2011, but it is based off of Gary Chapman's very popular work called The 5 Love Languages. So if you've heard about love languages, then this will be very familiar to you. But The Love Languages was a number 1 New York Times bestseller. It's also consistently on the Amazon top 100 books and in the top 5 of the New York Times best-selling books. So love languages is something that I think is very popular out there, used in both interpersonal relationships, but this Languages of Appreciation book talks about, as it says, appreciation in the workplace as well. So according to Chapman's theory, each person has one primary and one secondary love language. And he outlines 5 ways to express and experience appreciation, those being words of affirmation, quality time, gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. So Chapman suggests that to discover another person's language, first you have to observe the way they express their language of appreciation to others and analyze what they maybe complain about most often or what they might be requesting from you most often. And he theorizes that people tend to naturally give appreciation in the way that they prefer to receive appreciation, and that better communication between people can be accomplished when one can actually demonstrate their appreciation to the other person in the language that they understand. So a little bit more about these different languages. One of them being acts of service. So this is doing helpful things for others. This might be helping with tasks that reduce burden or ease stress. So one of the ways that you might show appreciation through this language would be to help pick up after a meeting, or to maybe volunteer to send that email out to your organization. Those would be tasks, acts that you can do to again, help reduce that burden on other people. Another language of appreciation is words of affirmation. So this means saying supportive things. So this is offering encouraging, affirming words and compliments to other people. So for example, you might tell somebody, you did a great job on that project or that program or leading that committee. Another love language or language of appreciation is gifts. So this can be giving or receiving gifts. And again, this languages of appreciation can tell you not only how you like to receive appreciation, but can also help you be aware of how you show appreciation to others. So for gifts, that means giving thoughtful or extravagant gifts, but they don't have to be extravagant. For example, to show your appreciation, maybe you want to bring cookies to a meeting to show a group, thank you so much for the work that you've been doing. Another language is quality time, which means spending meaningful time together. So this is when you give your undivided attention and engage in meaningful conversation or activities. So one way you might do this is to offer to meet with you for coffee to hear your thoughts. They want to spend that quality time with you, again, give you their undivided attention and really hear what you have to say. And the fifth language is physical touch. So being physically close or affectionate. In terms of workplace etiquette, this can be things like a hug when greeting somebody, a handshake, a pat on the back, maybe you sit close to them. Or an example would be high-fiving somebody when you see them on campus. Maybe that's a way that you show appreciation for them. So there's a really great example here of love languages in terms of tacos. So words of affirmation, you might be, your tacos are delicious. For acts of service, maybe I made you tacos. For receiving gifts, here's a taco. Quality time, let's go out for tacos together. Or physical touch, let me hold you like a taco. But you can also see on the graph on the right, the languages explained there again as well. Similar to MBTI, there's a lot of great memes out there for love languages and languages of appreciation. I find that languages of appreciation is really great for small teams that communicate together often. Those people that you know that you are going to want to show appreciation for probably on a regular basis, such as maybe an executive team, your leadership group for a student organization, your staff and your colleagues in a place that you work, things like that. It's also really helpful when you learn this information up front at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of working with a new group, because that way you already know exactly how that person wants to be appreciated and what they need from you throughout your time working together. It also gives you a list or a way to think of how you can check in with how, again, you are exhibiting your language of appreciation. So now that you know what these 5 languages are, you can be like, oh yeah, I see myself doing acts of service a lot. But it also helps you understand how you're meeting the needs of others. If I, for example, know that Anna's language of appreciation is quality time, then it gives me, and I know that in advance, I can sit there and ask myself, have I spent much quality time with Anna lately? Does she know that I appreciate her? Maybe that's something I need to do. And it also gives you a very helpful way of communicating your needs to others. Once you know what your preferred language of appreciation is, this is something you can share with other people. So you can sit down and say, I would really like words of affirmation from you. That is something that is that really resonates with me. And so that's something I would need or like to see from you. All right. And our last tool that we want to talk with you about today is the Enneagram. So Enneagram, or sometimes called Enneagram of Personality, is a model that's principally understood and taught as a typology of 9 interconnected personality types. So although there is dispute out there among where the background of Enneagram started, a lot of credit typically goes to Oscar Ichazo from the 1950s and Claudio Naranjo from the 1970s. These 2 are the most often credited with coming up with Enneagram kind of as we know it today. And it's used kind of in 2 different places. You see it a lot in business management, especially when working with interpersonal dynamics, and with spirituality in terms of finding your path to enlightenment. But overall, Enneagram helps you understand your self-awareness, your self-understanding, and self-development. So there's 9 personality types for Enneagram. The first one is the reformer or perfectionist. Different assessments that you might take out there, depending on who's putting the test out or the assessment or the inventory out, refer to each type with different names. So you'll see a couple different names listed here. And depending again on what website you might use or resource, you might see it referred to one of the other ways. So type 1s are sometimes called reformer or perfectionist. Type 2s, helper or giver. Type 3s are achievers or performers. Type 4, individualists, romantics. Type 5s are investigators or observers. Type 6s are loyalists, or sometimes called loyal skeptic. Type 7s are the enthusiast or the epicure. Type 8s are the challenger or the protector. And type 9s are the peacemaker or the mediator. So now I'll talk to you a little bit about what each of those means. So for type 1, the reformer or the perfectionist, these are your rational, idealistic types. They are principled, purposeful, self-controlled, and perfectionist. And if you know your Enneagram already, again, if you feel comfortable, share it with us in the chat. If not, that's okay. But maybe as you go through, if you don't know your Enneagram, maybe you'll recognize the type you think you might be here. Type 2s are called the helper or the giver. They are caring and interpersonal. They are demonstrative, generous, they are people-pleasing, and possessive. Our type 3s are our achievers or performers. They are success-oriented and pragmatic, adaptive, excelling, driven, and image conscious are all words associated with type 3s. I see some of you sharing. We have some type 2s and some type 3s with us today. That's awesome. Oh, a couple type 2s. Awesome. Our helpers, our givers are here, our achievers. The next set of types, type 4 is our individualists or our romantics. They are sensitive and withdrawn. They are expressive, dramatic, self-absorbed, temperamental. Some of these terms may not sound positive, but they can help you understand more about, again, yourself and how others see you. Type 5s are our investigators, observers. They are intense, they're cerebral, perceptive, innovative, secretive, isolated. Type 5 are our loyalists or our loyal skeptics. They are committed and security-oriented people. They are described as engaging, responsible, anxious, and suspicious. Type 7 is our enthusiast or epicure. They are busy, fun-loving. They are spontaneous, versatile, distractible, and scattered. I myself am a type 7. Our type 8s are challengers and protectors. They are powerful and dominating. They are self-confident, decisive, willful, and confrontational. And finally, type 9 are the peacemakers or mediators. They are easygoing and self-effacing. They are receptive, reassuring, agreeable, and complacent. So you can see the different types, personality types that you might be broken down into. There is, again, a lot of great resources out there, funny things to share with your friends or to help you understand each other in a group. For example, if I have an idea, but I'm not sure how I'm going to make it work, I might call my type 3 friend, which is Anna here in this call. Or I told Anna earlier, if you need help believing it's all going to work out or permission to do what you want to do, give me a call. I'm a type 7. I will help you do that. And then if you're familiar with The Office, you can see who you might relate to on here. I hate to say it, but on multiple personality types, I consistently get Michael Scott as who I am closest to, which, you know, at this point, I'm just going to own it. I'm Michael Scott, and that's okay. I am Beyonce always. With Enneagram, it gives you a general understanding of people, like I said, within those 9 types that we just went over. And an Enneagram is actually a geometric shape, which is what you see on your screen right here, these 9-pointed shapes. And this image kind of graphically represents, Enneagram also has a way that you can dive deeper into self-understanding. They have different components called wings. So wings are a person's basic type, but modified to some extent by the personality dynamics of the 2 adjacent types. So for example, I'm a 7. So my adjacent types are 6 and 8. So my wing would be my 6. I know that about myself. I already took the assessment in advance. I'm a 7, wing 6. This just tells me a little bit more about kind of what side of my 7 that I lean more towards. They also have, as you can see illustrated by the lines on the screen in this image, your stress and security points. So stress and security points are the types connected by the lines of the Enneagram figure and are believed by some to influence a person in more adverse or relaxed circumstances. For example, someone with a type 1, primary 1 type, may begin to think, feel, and act more like someone with a 4 type when stressed, or a 7 type when relaxed. So that's the great thing about Enneagram, is that it has kind of that surface level understanding of just knowing what your dominant type is. Again, I'm a 7, but it does have more resources out there if you do want to do a deeper dive into understanding your wings and your stress and your security points as well. All right. And with that, that is our summary of the 5 different personality assessments and tools that we wanted to share with you today. Thank you all for participating also in our chat. Does anybody have any questions about any of these different tools, or do any of you have any personal experience either doing activities in a student organization around these, or in a group, or when you took the assessment that you'd like to share with everyone? Anna, how about you? Have you done, I know you've done some activities with different personality assessments.
So I led a workshop once for middle school students. Actually, it was a leadership development workshop, and we did an assessment really similar to the True Colors. It had different titles. I believe orange was called an actor, and green was a writer, and you have like a manager and director, but it was the same basic principle. And it was fascinating because once they took the exam and got their like results, we split them into groups about like, oh, all of the writers are the greens, you know, over here, so on and so forth. And we made one group up of one person from each of those groups. And so we gave them a sheet of paper and some colored pens and asked them to plan the perfect vacation. And you could very clearly see which group did what. The orange group, or the actors, their entire paper was covered with images, drawings. They drew the plane they were going to fly into, the tropical island they were going to visit. And then you had the greens, theirs was a bulleted list of everything we need to pack, how we're going to get there, what travel is going to look like, the activities we're going to do. And then when you had all of them together in one group, they had a combination of all of them. So it was really interesting to see how the different personality types kind of work together and play off each other. And the most well thought out and best planned vacation by far was the group of all of the colors kind of mixed together. So it's kind of interesting to see how these all play out when you actually put them into practice.
Thanks for sharing. Kelly, how about you? Do you have any experience with personality assessments and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. So one that I use probably more frequently than not is StrengthsQuest. I chair a national leadership program, and that's one of the things we ask when we are receiving applications for folks. And the big reason for it is because we want to be able to, one, have a group of people who kind of represent all of the domains that Anna talked about, mainly because when you have a group or a team that represent all of those different domains, then you have a more complete group, and everyone can kind of build off of someone else's strengths where they may not necessarily have those strengths. And we use them really to split our facilitators up into partners. Imagine if you're a relationship building person and you really have zero executing strengths. That probably is going to be a little bit more challenging for the students that you lead if you're on a very time sensitive schedule. And so we try to pair those facilitators up based a lot on their strengths. And it's always really fascinating to see how they interact with each other and how their student groups kind of formulate around what their leader strengths are in the combinations too. So it's one of my favorites. Like I said earlier, it's also one of the best ways to talk about your strengths in job interviews. It's a well-versed language across industries. And so it's just an easy way to say, here are my top 5, and here's how I can actually utilize that language and show examples of how I've used those skills in my experience too. So definitely my favorite.
Thank you for sharing. Something that you and Anna both just said just reminds me, I know Anna just mentioned that the groups that work well together for the activities, she said, are the ones kind of comprised of someone from each of the 4 colors. And it sounds like what you were saying, Kelly, with strategically pairing or intentionally pairing your group leaders for your summer conference is also done so that's kind of a more well-rounded group as well. And I think that kind of, to me, that reminds me of the importance of being able to relate to others. So if there are throughout any of these personality assessments that you take or that you utilize, what it can really do is show you, again, where your strengths are, where your dominant traits are, or the things that you tend to lean on the most on your day-to-day basis are. But really, as you're looking at being a leader, whether that means of a student organization or in your career, being a supervisor, having a team that you work with, it can really help you become more well-rounded as a person in general by understanding that there are certain areas that you may not excel in all the time, but that might be needed from the people who you work with on a regular basis. And so how you can intentionally try and strengthen those other parts and provide what your peers or your employees need from you as well. And that really ties into just how knowing yourself can really help you understand others as well when it comes to diversity, when it comes to just having an awareness that your experience may not be the experience of everyone else. I know that for myself, the Myers-Briggs, the MBTI, my friend group uses that. I'm not going to even kid you, on a daily basis. We have a couple different group chats where we just send each other memes all day of different things that remind us of ourselves. It really helps us, again, be aware that we're not all the same, that we don't experience things the same. I would say that Enneagram is very similar to MBTI in that it can be used in that way of understanding personality types and differences, what people need from you as well. And similar to what Kelly had just shared about strengths, love languages is that way in terms of being a pretty common language, if you will, that people are familiar with and that you can express your needs and your styles through as well in the workplace too. So hopefully these tools, again, can be useful for you on a daily basis and your experience as a college student in group and teamwork, in student organizations, but also beyond in your career and in your interpersonal and personal relationships outside of the workplace and outside of the university as well. So with that, we want to thank you for being with us today. I do want to put a couple things on your radar as well that we have coming up. Next Thursday will be our virtual leadership summit. And so this is an event that will be going on all day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. It will primarily take place on our Instagram account. So if you don't already follow us, I'll have our Instagram account on the next page here, but it's K-State_CSI. Follow us on there and participate in our virtual leadership summit throughout the day on Instagram. We will continue to have Thursdays at 3 workshops like this for the rest of the semester. So I know a few of you are in here because of a class requirement. If you still have a few more requirements you need to meet, please come to one of our upcoming events or another Thursday at 3. Another series we do is called Wisdom Wednesdays, where we have guest speakers from across the university come and talk about their leadership journey and just kind of the lessons they've learned through their experiences. So our next one is next Friday, March 31st, and that's with, not next Friday, in 2 weeks on Wednesday, March 31st, and that's with Professor Shardy Baird. She's going to talk about how prioritizing and persisting has brought her peace. And then on April 14th, we're going to have our Vice Provost of Student Success, Dr. Jeannie Brown-Leonard, share her story as well. And then also just a friendly reminder that all of our workshops and resources are available on our CSI YouTube channel. This session will also be uploaded there, so you can find more helpful tools on there as well. Thanks again for joining us. If you have any questions, Anna and I will stick on to chat. Like I said, please follow us on Instagram and Twitter. You can see our account handles right there to stay engaged and stay connected with us. Feel free, though, to reach out to us anytime, and we hope you have a great day. Thanks again.